Hey everyone, today I'm joined by the creative director of Watch Dogs Legion, Clint Hocking. Clint, thank you so much for being here. I know you and the team are super busy working on the game, so I really appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to have a chance to talk more about the game.
Of course. So I kind of just want to jump right into things, and a lot of people have been talking about the delay. The game was originally going to release in March of this year, but obviously that didn't end up happening. Could you talk about why that decision was made, things that you've had time to improve on, and things like that?
Well, I think the why part of the decision is really it was a Ubisoft decision. We pushed all of our titles for the year back, and really the idea was we just wanted to really focus on really getting quality for our games, making them the best that they could be. And Watch Dogs Legion has a lot of innovation, and we've gone through a lot of iterations trying to make the best game we can. And it was just a really big boon for us to have this extra time to really carry the game over the goal line. The major things that we improved with the time were first we took a hard look at what Play As Anyone was giving us, and really looked at ways to add a lot more new abilities, and simplify the progression systems so that we could really have players focusing more on playing a broader and more diverse range of characters, rather than trying to take maybe a smaller number of characters on the kind of edge of a DPS progression. And what we found is this has opened up the game a lot more, and really emphasized our philosophy of we want players to be able to play who they want to be, and play the way they want to play. And now they can really do that a lot better. And it also gave us an opportunity, these new abilities and properties that we added to our characters, and the way we chunked up some of the design elements we had, and attached them to characters more, really have made the characters a lot more distinctive. Construction workers and spies and street artists, and all kinds of different characters that you find in the world that have their own unique abilities that are surprising and delightful. We got such a positive feedback about Helen last year at E3, and Helen was sort of this prototypical idea of like a character who's highly affordant, and she plays the way you expect her to play, but yet it's still delightful and fun. And we really wanted to just have like a lot more of that in the game, and that's what the lion's share of our focus. Another big part of our effort went to the Borough Uprising. So previously we didn't have any kind of mechanical way for you to free the city and get the people to rise up and take their city back. And so we added these borough liberation activities, whether it's putting up DedSec propaganda, or tearing down Albion propaganda, or doing sabotage, or whatever, culminating in these climactic missions that have a lot of variety and unique gameplay challenges to them, so that they feel fresh and unique each time you do them, give you more ways to recruit people, win the population over to your cause. So like big new features and big improvements to everything. It was a very productive year for the team, actually.
And one thing I definitely noticed was, at least compared to last year, the UI definitely changed a lot. And I mean, for me, I personally think it's just way cleaner and nicer. But a reason I also bring that up is I feel like there's now no longer a leveling system, at least that I could see. Is that
Yeah, we
correct?
pulled out a lot of the progression systems because they weren't giving us the kind of player experience that we wanted, and it felt great. And so by simplifying the progression, removing the individual levels off of characters, and having characters just be who they are, and focusing on their unique abilities as individuals, and putting the progression in unlocking DedSec upgrades and stuff like that with tech points, sort of the same. Are equivalent to research points from Watch Dogs 2, putting the progression on the whole team just made it a lot cleaner and easier and more accessible and understandable. And it also, to speak to your original point there, it allowed us to streamline the UI, and make the whole game just a lot easier to read and understand, and make it more playable.
No, I definitely agree because at least, with the other two Watch Dogs games, there was never really like a leveling system. So I think a lot of people were kind of surprised when you guys showed that off a little bit in the first demo. So I'm glad that, you made it more casual for a lot of players. And that also brings me into another thing. At least in this demo, is like permadeath still in this game, or was it just turned off for this
Yeah,
demo?
exactly.
Could you talk about
Exactly.
that?
So last year when we unveiled the game, permadeath was the game. Like it was always part of the game. But after playtesting the game, playing it ourselves, we started to feel like actually, permadeath is awesome, and we want to keep it as a mode, and we want to make sure that there's the default mode of the game is it doesn't have permadeath, and that permadeath is an opt-in mode for the hardcore players who really want to go down that path. There's a couple consequences of that. One is that the permadeath mode previously, or permadeath in the game previously, meant that we had to prevent your team from being wiped out. So we would just add characters to your team if your team got too small. But in moving it to a mode, we were able to get rid of that contrivance, which means now if you play in permadeath mode and your characters all get killed or captured or arrested or hospitalized, you can team wipe and you can game wipe. So it's a real hardcore mode now if you want to play that way. And then for players who don't want to play with those kinds of consequences, have a more accessible experience, that's great. But we don't entirely take away the idea that some characters might be doomed, or some characters might be terminally ill. So there are still some characters you could find and recruit if you chose to, who could have as a property on the character the consequence that they could permanently die.
Why play as anyone instead of having one main character, for example? Like, was this always the plan, or did it sort of turn into that? And was like London always going to be the location as well? Could you talk about how like development kind of started on
Yeah,
London?
so I mean, those London and Play as Anyone both came very early in development, and they kind of came hand in hand. First we looked at Play as Anyone. We looked at Watch Dogs 1 and we said, here's Aiden, and he's kind of this vigilante loner, and he kind of teams up with DedSec a little bit on the side, something partly without even fully realizing it for portion of the game. And then in Watch Dogs 2, you play Marcus, who actually is getting recruited into DedSec in the very first introduction, and then becomes a part of DedSec, which is this group of people. And then in the climactic mission, you actually get to play as them. You switch between them and play the other characters. And so one of the questions we ask ourselves is, how does DedSec, recruit? How do they make their team? And we said, well, what if we made the game where you actually build your own DedSec and you recruit some people? But we didn't want to make a game with 10 characters that you find and then that we authored, and then that's how you build your team through the story. We said, well, what if you could just recruit whoever you wanted? And someone said, yeah, but that would mean you'd have to be able to recruit anyone. Like, how would we do that? And then we're like, that sounds pretty cool. Like, what if we actually did that? That sounds like a great idea. And then we started talking more seriously about what if you could play as anyone, and what would that mean, and how would we do it? And the more we talked about it, the scarier it got, because the harder it sounded, but also the more exciting it got. And then to your point about London and how these converge, like, we were also looking at different cities and different locations, trying to find somewhere that was like instantly recognizable, that everyone would know and understand, and place where everybody kind of maybe dreams of one day visiting, or a city that people recognize from movies and films and all kinds of popular culture. And London was a leading contender. And when we started talking about Play as Anyone and London together, we realized, London is an incredibly diverse city. It's one of the most diverse cities in the world. There's people from all over, multiple waves of immigration over centuries. There's dozens of different languages spoken there. It's really one of the most international and culturally diverse places on Earth. And when we said, if we want to have a game where you can literally recruit and play as anyone in the population, we should really pick a city where that's going to shine, and where that anyone is going to be as broad as set as possible. And so that's where London really became the seat of Play as Anyone, and those two ideas kind of became one. And that really happened within the first 3 months of development.
with Play As Anyone, a lot of people are also wondering about the story. More specifically, will there be like multiple endings, or different outcomes for different missions since these are different characters, for example?
There are different sort of major chapters in the story, focusing on the major villains and sort of subplots that weave together into a giant thread as you're working to take down, discover who Zero Day is, and take down Zero Day, who you meet in the introduction of the game, and in the prologue when you're playing Dalton. And some of those story threads have branches to the endings. Like, do you kill the person or do you set them free, kind of decision. But for the most part, the main story follows a traditional arc. There's a few branches with a few interesting twists in them. And I think what the focus really was making sure that all the different characters that you could play as, when they're in cutscenes and when they're appearing in the story, that they're going to feel unique and fresh and different and interesting, and their animation and their voice performance is going to be unique to them, depending on their persona and the kind of person they are, so that your cutscenes, feel personal to you.
Well, Clint, thank you so much for joining me. I know I learned a lot, so I definitely expect a lot of viewers to also be happy with this. It was kind of rough because, we didn't hear anything for months, and now there's just like so much information being released. But yeah, just thanks again, and thank you everyone for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.